Hello, sweethearts. How are you all doing? I have now come to the last part of chapter 21 of A Contemporary Encyclopedia of English Literature. We are going to talk about the British novelists after High Modernists: Somerset Maugham, J.B. Priestley, Evelyn Waugh, and Greene. Do you know these writers? Have you read any of their works? If not, this is an opportunity. After watching this video, please read one of their major works. Okay? Now, let us start with Somerset Maugham. Somerset Maugham was born in 1874 and he died in 1965. Pretty long life he had. He was a playwright, novelist, and short story writer, and was brought up in France. When his parents died, he went there and he grew up there. There is the interest in French culture and French language. You can see that in his novels. He was a withdrawn man. He was a withdrawn character and self-conscious also, especially in childhood. And he was teased for his poor English. Why poor English? Because he grew up in France and had French as his first language, and he had a heavily accented English. And another problem was he was very short in stature, and people made fun of him because he was very short. This made him withdrawn, self-conscious, and poor boy, he also developed a stammer. Stuttering. He could not speak properly like that he spoke. Oh. And then Somerset Maugham studied literature, philosophy, German. Remember, the 1930s poets also were influenced by German language. Do you remember? And Somerset Maugham wrote his first book while he was in Germany. That was the biography of an opera composer. Another problem for his social sensitivity was that he was bisexual and he had a troubled love life, and this influenced his character portrayals. Somerset Maugham's characters are also quiet and socially inept people. This is our Somerset Maugham. Now about his writing and other jobs. With the success of his first novel, Liza of Lambeth, Maugham began to write full-time. He began to write full-time after his first novel, Liza of Lambeth, became highly successful. During the First World War, he served in France as a member of the literary ambulance drivers. Remember the literary ambulance drivers? Have you heard of them before? They were a group of 24 well-known writers, including the Americans, John Dos Passos and E. Cummings. They worked as ambulance drivers in the First World War. Somerset Maugham worked in Switzerland and Russia for the British Secret Intelligence Service from 1916. The war was raging at that time. The First World War was raging at that time, and Maugham worked in the British Secret Intelligence Service. In his novels, he portrayed the last days of colonialism in India, Southeast Asia, China, and the Pacific. Maugham emerged as a significant travel writer of the interwar years, comparable with contemporaries such as Evelyn Waugh. Evelyn Waugh was also a travel writer. Somerset Maugham was also a travel writer. With the success of his first novel, Liza of Lambeth, he had started writing, and he wrote a number of novels, and then he also started writing travel literature. Due to his travels, he got fascinated by the Orient and the South Sea Islands. He was fascinated by the Orient and the South Sea Islands. Of Human Bondage is a very famous novel, 1915, his masterpiece. It is strongly autobiographical in nature And the originally planned title was Beauty from Ashes. The current title of Human Bondage is taken from Spinoza's Ethics. The novel was initially criticized in both England and the United States. Of Human Bondage was originally criticized. The American novelist Theodore Dreiser referred to the book as a work of genius, comparing it with the Beethoven Symphony. Wow! And Dreiser gave the book a lift. This comment made by Dreiser gave the book a lift, and it has never been out of print since. The plot. The novel of Human Bondage deals with the life of Philip Carey. Here I'm not going to actually tell you the story. Please do your own reading. It is extremely important. Of Human Bondage is the story of Philip Carey. And Philip Carey is, like Somerset Maugham, an orphaned boy to start with. And he was brought up by his uncle. Philip is a club-footed man. Philip is club-footed. He is physically disabled. And it caused him self-consciousness and embarrassment. Philip Carey is club-footed and embarrassed. This echoes Maugham's own struggles with his stutter and homosexuality. The novel begins when Philip Carey's mother has died, and his father also had died a few months ago. That is how he becomes orphaned. And that is how he gets to be living with his uncle and aunt. His uncle is a vicar, and Philip grows up in the vicarage probably, I don't know how it's pronounced. His uncle does not give him any love. He is very cold towards Philip. And then from there he is sent to a boarding school. Philip's growing up is detailed. His disability and sensitive nature makes it very difficult for him to survive there. And Philip then wants to go to Germany. He enjoys his stay there in Germany. From there he goes on a business trip to France. In France, he gets a completely new life. He makes new friends. He attends art school. There is a girl whom he becomes friends with called Fanny Price. Remember, Fanny Price is also the name of the protagonist in Mansfield Park. And you know, Philip does not reciprocate Fanny Price's love, and Fanny commits suicide. Philip tries hard to become an artist, but he realizes that he'll never be an artist. Then he returns home to his uncle and tries to study medicine, and falls desperately in love with Mildred. That is the female protagonist. Mildred is a waitress in a tea shop, and Mildred marries another man. Philip then has an affair with Nora Nesbitt. She's an author, a small-scale author. And then Mildred returns pregnant and says that she was not able to marry her lover because that man already had a wife and children. Philip then breaks off his relationship with Nora and takes care of Mildred. But then Mildred falls in love with Philip's friend and runs away with him. Philip has to take care of Mildred's baby. That was when he reunites with Mildred. Again, he meets her and develops an attachment for her baby. Like this, their relationship is like a roller coaster ride. Mildred has been living as a prostitute at that time. Finally, Philip's uncle dies and Philip inherits money from him. There is also there are also some other characters that I have not mentioned. So the whole novel is like Philip's search for happiness. Philip is searching for happiness and he's trying to settle down in life, not being able to do that properly. Of human bondage or the strength of the emotions. That is the novel. So the other characters are Mildred Rogers, the self-centered and destructive waitress Philip falls in love with, Nora Nesbitt, a young caring writer who has an affair with Philip, Thorpe Athelney, I did not mention him. Athelney becomes a friend of Philip later, towards the end. He's a caring man who mentors Philip and takes him in when his fortune is lost. Mildred destroys Philip and it is Athelney who saves Philip. In the end, he becomes Philip's father-in-law. That is, Philip marries his daughter. Sally, Thorpe's daughter, marries him. So that is the story of Human Bondage, you see. Leslie Howard as Philip Carey and Bette Davis as Mildred. The Moon and Sixpence came in 1919. It is a novel told in episodic form by a first-person narrator. The novel provides a series of glimpses into the mind and soul of the central character, Charles Strickland. The central character is Charles Strickland, a middle-aged English stockbroker who abandons his wife and children abruptly to pursue his desire to become an artist. Like Philip Carey also tries to become an artist unsuccessfully. Charles Strickland also wants to become an artist. And he is telling the story in first person. The story is said to be loosely based on the life of the French painter Paul Gauguin. Remember? He was influenced by French culture. Somerset Maugham depicted it. Paul Gauguin was a French artist who rejected France and civilization to live in Tahiti. This is a self-portrait by Paul Gauguin. Cakes and Ale, or The Skeleton in the Cupboard, is a 1930 novel. It's a roman à clef. What do you mean by roman à clef? A novel with a key. That means a novel that is based on some real life incidents and you have to know the real life connection in order to understand and appreciate the novel. So the real life connection is the key to the novel. The title Cakes and Ale, or The Skeleton in the Cupboard, is drawn from Sir Toby Belch's speech to Malvolio in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. You can watch my videos on Twelfth Night in Udemy. I have explained it there. The narrator, William Ashenden, is approached by the Victorian writer Edward Driffield's second wife, Amy. Hello, Edward Driffield is a Victorian writer. He had a first wife and now a second wife, Amy. The second wife is approaching William Ashenden to get her husband's biography written. Edward's first wife, Rosie, was reproved by the conservative society. Nobody liked Rosie because she was an unconventional woman. For her frankness and sexual freedom, she was reproved by the society. Yet, she had inspired Edward to produce his greatest work. The novel has veiled characterizations of Thomas Hardy as Edward Driffield and Hugh Walpole. Thomas Hardy, who also had many sexual affairs with women, is the model for Edward Driffield. The key issues in the novel are how much information the narrator will divulge to Driffield's second wife, who wants to control her husband's story. Amy wants to control her husband's story. She wants her husband's story to be written in a manner that she will approve. But actually the real story is in favor of Rosie, the first wife. So what is truth and how far can you tell the truth? The deep mystery of love to which William Ashenden holds the key. The narrator or the biographer holds the key to the mystery of love. Next novel, The Razor's Edge, came in 1944. Its epigraph is this: the sharp edge of a razor is difficult to pass over. Thus the wise say the path to salvation is hard. This quotation is taken from a verse in Kathopanishad, a Sanskrit Upanishad, Kathopanishad. Unlike most of his other novels, its main characters are American, not British. For the first time, here is Somerset Maugham creating American characters, not British. The protagonist, Larry Darrell, is an American pilot, and he is traumatized by his experiences in the First World War. He abandons his wealthy friends and lifestyle and travels to India seeking enlightenment. Larry Darrell, the American pilot, is traumatized by the experiences of the First World War, abandons his wealthy friends and lifestyle, and travels to India seeking enlightenment. The story's themes of Eastern mysticism and war weariness were appreciated by readers during the Second World War, because the novel came towards the end of the Second World War. This is from the movie The Razor's Edge. Liza of Lambeth, the first novel, was written when Mom worked as a doctor in Lambeth. Hello, remember Lambeth? Our William Blake was associated with Lambeth. He lived there. The Magician is another work, fantasy novel. The character magician is a caricature of the occultist poet Aleister Crowley. He attempts to create life. A Man of Honor is the first of his many plays. The Painted Veil, title taken from Shelley, a classic novel set in England and Hong Kong. Kitty Fane is the protagonist. She is a beautiful and love-starved heroine. She has to accompany her husband to the midst of the cholera pandemic. The title is taken from a sonnet by P.B. Shelley. Lift not the painted veil, which those who live call life. That is Shelley's line. Here, painted veil means that life is an illusion. Rain is a 1921 short story. It depicts the moral disintegration of a missionary who attempts to convert a prostitute, Sadie Thompson. He attempts to convert a prostitute and he himself morally disintegrates. The Letter is a play dramatized from a short story. Footprints in the Jungle and The Outstation. These are also short stories dealing with the lives of Western, mostly British colonists in the Far East. Remember, Somerset Maugham is a pioneer of the short story genre. The Gentleman in the Parlour is travel writings on his journey through Burma, Siam, Cambodia, and Vietnam. The Gentleman in the Parlour. The Summing Up and Strictly Personal are his autobiographies. The Summing Up and Strictly Personal are his autobiographies. Next, we have to talk about J.B. Priestley. 1894 to 1984, that is the time J.B. Priestley lived. He was a novelist, playwright, critic, and broadcaster. He spoke on the BBC. He is regarded as the Dickens of the 20th century because of his social realism. And J.B. Priestley served in the First World War And his works show his interest in England and English character. He had a deep interest in classical music, and he wrote over 60 books, of which 40 are plays. 20 novels, 40 plays. Priestley's literary criticism, not all 20 were not novels. There was also literary criticism, including volumes on George Meredith and Thomas Love Peacock. Priestley, quarrel between Priestley and Graham Greene. See this? J.B. Priestley sought legal action against Graham Greene for a defamatory portrait of him in the novel Stamboul Train. You know what happened? Graham Greene wrote a novel Stamboul Train. There, J.B. Priestley is depicted as a very hilarious Cockney novelist, Quinn Savory. And J.B. Priestley went to court against Graham Greene. J.B. Priestley has written 26 novels, not even 20, 26. His first popular success was the novel The Good Companions, written with Edward Knobloch. His first popular success was not written alone, it was written with Edward Knobloch. 3 people are involved in the novel. They are at crises in their lives, and all 3 of them meet at a concert party. Angel Pavement is from 1930, set in London during the Great Depression. It centers on an intricate business swindle involving the mysterious Mr. Golspie. Angel Pavement is about a business swindle. Hey, this is J.B. Priestley broadcasting on BBC. Priestley's plays now. He has written plays with socialist themes. And J.B. Priestley has depicted the theme of time in his plays. There is a group of plays called time plays. They are influenced by J.W. Dunn's theory of consciousness and time. J.W. Dunn discussed the concept of time in the book An Experiment with Time. And J.B. Priestley wrote time plays influenced by J.W. Dunn's theory. And Dunn's theory is that past, present and future are simultaneous. Hello, that is an idea that you see in T.S. Eliot. In T.S. Eliot's concept of tradition, Eliot talks about not only the pastness of the past, but also its presence. Now, J.W. Dunn influenced not only J.B. Priestley, but also Aldous Huxley. When I talked about Aldous Huxley, do you remember I had mentioned at the end in passing that Aldous Huxley wrote about the concept of time. So did J.B. Priestley. Hello friends, are you following me? Are you bored? If you're bored, pause the video, take a walk, wash your face, drink some tea and come back. On time, J.B. Priestley also wrote Man and Time. Other than J.B. Priestley's plays, there is also Man and Time. Take a look at J.B. Priestley's plays. A series of his plays written during the 1930s and 40s is called Time Plays. These plays explore different concepts of time, and they include Dangerous Corner, Eden End, I Have Been Here Before, Time and the Conways, and Inspector Calls, that is very famous, I'm telling you, it's considered a classic. A Severed Head is a J.B. Priestley play that is an adaptation of a farcical novel of the same name by Iris Murdoch. Hey, you didn't understand. I'll tell you again. Iris Murdoch wrote a farcical novel called A Severed Head, and J.B. Priestley converted it into a play. Did you get me? Ta-dang! Next we are going to talk about J.B. Priestley's post-war works. During and after the Second World War, Priestley made political radio broadcasts showing hopes for a new England. He was involved in the campaign for nuclear disarmament. Wow, he was an activist. After the war, he was engaged in anti-war activism. Literature and Western Man is a massive 500-page survey of Western literature that he has written. Literature and Western Man. Man and Time explores his ideas on time. His autobiographies are Martin Released and Instead of the Trees. Next writer we have to talk about is Evelyn Waugh, 1903 to 1966. Evelyn Waugh travelled widely, served in the British Army during the Second World War, converted to Catholicism. So did Graham Greene. Graham Greene wrote Catholic novels. Evelyn Waugh also wrote Catholic novels. You know what? Evelyn Waugh fictionalized all his experiences. The main characters of Evelyn Waugh are all snobs, and he attacked the sin of vulgarity. He attacked snobbery and vulgarity. His heroes are naive young men who suffered embarrassment and hardship because they failed to understand or defeat the exponents of vice. Evelyn Waugh created naive young men who suffered embarrassment and hardship because they could not stand up against vice. This is Evelyn Waugh. Not looking very happy, or probably he is squinting at the sunlight. Evelyn Waugh's works. Decline and Fall was his first published work. It's a satire on Britain in the 1920s. Vile Bodies is also a satire. You know what happened in the 1920s? A lot of rich young people, immediately after the terrible consequences of the war, what are these rich people doing? They are partying and having a good time. They were called bright young people who didn't really care about the consequences of war. Vile Bodies is a satire on these bright young people, or the rich youth partying after World War I in the 1920s. Then he has written a novel called Black Mischief. I don't know anything about it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't know. You should look it up. Study, research on your own. Scoop is a satire on sensational journalism, or Fleet Street. Fleet Street is a street in London which is a center of newspaper publishing. A lot of newspapers come from Fleet Street. And Evelyn Waugh's Scoop is a satire on Fleet Street. A Handful of Dust is very famous. The title is taken from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. It's also a satire on the heartless and frivolous world of the wealthy and the fashionable. A Handful of Dust is a satire on the heartless and frivolous world of the wealthy and the fashionable. The Bride's Head Revisited is the first of his Catholic novels. Evelyn Waugh has written Catholic novels like Graham Greene, remember? The Bride's Head Revisited is also a famous movie. Sword of Honor is a trilogy of Second World War novels. Sword of Honor trilogy. Hey, this is the movie poster of Bride's Head Revisited. Graham Greene lived from 1904 to 1991. Oh, he died so recently. He was a novelist and short story writer, playwright, travel writer, essayist, and critic. Oh my God, he did a lot of things. He made a journey through the interior of Liberia in 1935. He journeyed through the interior of Liberia in 1935, which became the subject of a classic travel book called Journey Without Maps. Liberia is the African country made of slaves. On his return, Graham Greene was appointed film critic and later literary critic of The Spectator. As film critic, he attacked Shirley Temple. In 1938, Graham Greene visited Mexico to report on religious persecution. The communists in Mexico were persecuting the religious people, the Christians at that time. And he went to Mexico to report on this. This influenced his fiction and prompted another travel book, The Lawless Roads. He was baptized an Anglican, became an atheist at Oxford University, converted to Roman Catholicism in 1926 at the age of 21. This is Graham Greene. Graham Greene. Features of his works. Graham Greene's works explore the ambivalent moral and political issues of the modern world. You see, in the modern world, there are many political, moral issues. Many of these issues are ambivalent. He stressed formal experimentation and a language of metaphor. He wrote in an experimental style, metaphoric style. He responded to the formal experiments of the early modernists without subscribing entirely to their aesthetic aims. He did not write completely like the modernists, but he adapted some of their ideas and practices. Graham Greene suffered from bipolar disorder, which reflected in his works. The themes of Graham Greene include Catholicism and philosophy. He also wrote novels of international politics and espionage. Many of his novels are about international politics and espionage. Now let us take a deeper look at his novels, the early novels. Graham Greene's first novel is The Man Within. The Man Within, 1929, is his first novel. It's a historical thriller. He employed the themes of pursuit, guilt, treachery, and failure, and these themes became the hallmark of his fiction. Stumble Train, remember that controversial book, was a popular success and a thriller. It was the first of his novels which Greene termed entertainments. Greene termed some of his novels entertainments. And Stumble Train is the first of his entertainments. It was followed by It's a Battlefield, England Made Me, A Gun for Sale, The Confidential Agent, Loser Takes All, Our Man in Havana. Our Man in Havana is quite famous. Catholic novels of Graham Greene. There are 4 major Catholic novels. Remember, The Brideshead Revisited is a Catholic novel by Evelyn Waugh. What are Graham Greene's Catholic novels? Let us see. Brighton Rock. It is his first explicitly Catholic novel. The Power and the Glory. We'll deal with it in detail. The Heart of the Matter. The End of the Affair. Hello, I'm telling you one thing. All these novels are prescribed in some university or the other. I have seen all these novels in the syllabi of Indian universities. It is important that you know the details, the plot summaries of all these novels. Also sharing similar themes were The Quiet American. It's about his experience in Vietnam. Wow, he went to Vietnam and wrote about it. Brighton Rock is a murder mystery involving the Catholic boy gangster Pinky Brown. Pinky does not seem to be the proper name for a gangster. The Heart of the Power and the Glory, I'll deal with it in detail. The heart of the matter has the protagonist Henry Scobie. He's a police officer in a West African British colony. Henry Scobie is a police officer in a West African British colony during the Second World War. The heart of the matter has an Henry Scobie has an extramarital affair with a woman. That is very un-Catholic, anti-Catholic. He has an extramarital affair with a woman who survives a shipwreck and ultimately commits suicide. The end of the affair is the last of Greene's Catholic novels. With that novel, he ended the affair of Catholic novels. It is set in London during the Second World War. Sarah Miles, that is the female protagonist. She is the wife of an impotent civil servant, Henry Miles. Sarah falls in love with Maurice Bendrix, a writer. Sarah Miles falls in love with Maurice Bendrix. It is based on Graham Greene's own affair with Lady Catherine Wolston. Dun-dun-dun. Hello. The Bollywood film Jab Tak Hai Jaan is inspired by this novel. Have you watched that movie? You can pause the video right now. Go watch the movie in YouTube if you want. 4 more novels, etc. That is the title of our slide. Graham Greene's other novels show the clash between the committed and the uncommitted people. People committed to religion, Catholicism, or to something else, clashing with uncommitted people. Such novels are A Burnt Out Case set in the Belgian Congo, The Comedians set in Haiti. Oh my God! Graham Greene has travelled all over the world. He's a globetrotter. So A Burnt Out Case is set in the Belgian Congo. It used to be prescribed in Kerala University once upon a time. The Comedians is set in Haiti. The Honorary Consul is set in Argentina-Paraguay border. About this, they have asked a question in NET before, I remember. The Human Factor is set in London underworld of spies. There are more novels, short stories, plays and a screenplay. I am not talking about them. You can look it up yourself. A Sort of Life and Ways of Escape are autobiographical works. They are autobiographies actually. And now we come to a controversy. Graham Greene severely criticized the 9-year-old actress Shirley Temple in his film criticism of Wee Willie Winkie. A little girl was a very famous actress, and Graham Greene said that Shirley Temple displayed a dubious coquetry which appealed to middle-aged men and clergymen. What he means is, Shirley Temple acts in such a coquettish way that appeals only to pedophiles. That is the meaning. Very sharp criticism. You know Shirley Temple from The Bluest Eye, don't you? Pecola Breedlove wants to be like Shirley Temple. The Power and the Glory, 1940 novel, is very famous. It is set in the state of Tabasco in Mexico during the 1930s, when the Mexican government strove to suppress the Catholic Church. The Mexican government cracked down on the Catholic Church. And about that experience, he has already written in Lawless Roads. That is the setting of The Power and the Glory. The main character is a nameless Roman Catholic called Whiskey Priest. A nameless Roman Catholic called Whiskey Priest, who combines a great power for self-destruction with a desperate quest for dignity. The Whiskey Priest is the last of the priests. He is not a great priest. He is doing a lot of wrong things. And he drinks a lot of whiskey, which has given him his name. And he has a lot of power for self-destruction. He is destroying his own life. And he has done a lot of ignoble things. But he will not betray his religion. He holds on to his religion steadfast. The other main character is a lieutenant or lieutenant of the police, who is given the task of hunting down this priest. While the whiskey priest is not doing the right thing but holds on to his religion, the lieutenant is not doing the right thing but holds on to his political ideology. They are like mirror images, And the lieutenant or lieutenant is a committed socialist who despises everything that the church stands for. The lieutenant despises religion and the church. The whiskey priest is a questionable hero. That's a kind of hero, questionable hero. He has evaded the authorities for 10 years and fear dominates his life. He has done a lot of wrong things, both religiously as well as politically, and fear dominates his life. He's a small man. He dreads pain. Only brandy can give him courage when necessary. He has sinned, for in a moment of loneliness, he has fathered a child, which is very wrong for a Catholic priest. He knows he is unworthy of the priesthood, but cannot abandon those who need him, even though he wants to. So he cannot abandon his priesthood, whereas other people like Padre Jose have abandoned religion. Padre Jose is a disgraced old priest who chose to marry his housekeeper rather than die. And Padre Jose is now facing continual humiliation. Now let us talk about the lieutenant or the lieutenant. The lieutenant is the whiskey priest's pursuer, an ascetic police lieutenant, a priest of the new order. Even though he hates religion, he is also like a priest, blindly holding on to his political ideology, whose real life begins with the socialist revolution a few years ago. So there has been a socialist revolution in Mexico. That is when the lieutenant has come to power. He believes that religion has had a corrupting influence on the lives of people. And he is out to destroy religion. Although the lieutenant has destroyed lives and property for his ideals, he views the world as rational, and his faith lies in the power of a godless state. He does not believe in God. He does not want God in his state. He also seeks another wanted man, a murderer named James Calver. Both of them are caught at the end. The whiskey priest is like a Christ figure, and James Calver is like a Barabbas figure. The mestizo is another character. He's like a Judas figure. The priest flees to a banana plantation. Oh, that reminds me, I have to buy bananas. Just joking. Are you paying attention? The priest flees to a banana plantation. There were colonial plantations, banana plantations, etc., indigo plantations, etc. Then from there, he goes to the poor village. Where is this happening? In Latin America, Mexico. He goes to a poor village where his daughter Brigida lives a shameful life there. She's like a bastard child. She has ignominious parentage, but she does not betray her father to the lieutenant. She has more integrity than her father. During his flight, the priest acquires an unwelcome companion, that is the miserable peasant of mixed Spanish and native blood. He is the mestizo. The priest becomes friends with the mestizo. The mestizo is a disreputable figure. Mestizo means cross blood, cross breed. That is the meaning of the word. The mestizo intends to surrender the priest for a reward of 700 pesos, just like Judas betrayed Christ. The two men strive to outwit one another. Who are the two men? The mestizo and the whiskey priest. But the priest ultimately pities the mestizo, realizing that he too is made in the image of God. The priest does not hate the mestizo, and the mestizo lays a trap for him. Once the priest is safely across the mountains, he again encounters the mestizo. the mestizo appears with a note from the wounded killer Calver, begging the priest to return to hear his confession. This is a trap. The mestizo has come from a note from the murderer Calver. And the note says the priest has to hear Calver's confession, because there is no other priest in Mexico. Everybody has been either killed or converted. The note is a trap set by the police. After the lieutenant finally captures him, the two men have a lengthy debate. Which are the two men? The lieutenant and the whiskey priest. They have a lengthy debate on the philosophical merits of church and state. The lieutenant tells him, you are a danger. That is why we kill you. I have nothing against you. It is your ideas. The lieutenant says, this is not personal. It's about your ideas. I don't like your ideas. Which are the ideas? Religious ideas, Catholic ideas. The lieutenant rethinks. At police headquarters, the priest asks to make his confession to Padre Jose. The whiskey priest, wants to make a confession, and he is confessing to Padre Jose. Against all his principles, the lieutenant approaches Padre Jose with the request. Actually, the lieutenant is not supposed to help the whiskey priest. It is illegal for him to approach Padre Jose, but the lieutenant does it. Because the lieutenant now feels sorry for the whiskey priest. It is an act of charity as well as of treason against the government. But Padre Jose, suspecting a trick, refuses, because if he hears the confession, the government can technically arrest him. The lieutenant informs the whiskey priest, slipping him a small flask of illegal brandy to steady him before his impending execution. The lieutenant even gets whiskey priest some brandy, which is also illegal. For the lieutenant, a world without the priest seems suddenly empty. Even though the lieutenant pursued the whiskey priest and caught him finally, now it is like he depends on the image of the whiskey priest. Without the whiskey priest, he cannot survive. That kind of feeling the lieutenant gets. The lieutenant and the whiskey priest are like two sides of the same coin. So, that is the end of chapter 21 of A Contemporary Encyclopedia of British Literature, volume 3. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. Please look up all these writers on your own and have a good time studying. Bye-bye.